The last man left in the building wasn't the CEO, the lawyer, or the tech genius. It was a janitor named Harold, who was about to uncover a mistake that could cost the company millions. But what no one knew, not even Harold himself, was that someone powerful was watching. And by the time the lights shut off that night, everything would change. The building had gone to sleep hours ago, but Harold was still moving, his old leather boots creaking against the marble floors, the same pattern he'd walked for 17 years. Office lights flickered off behind him, one by one, as he made his way down the 39th floor hallway. Slow but steady, a limp in his left leg from a roofing fall back in '85 that never fully healed. It was just after 11:30 p.m., and all you could hear was a low hum of the AC and the quiet click of his cart's wheels. Most of the city below had already surrendered to the dark, but Harold didn't mind being the last one standing. He preferred it. In the silence, there were no pretenses, no fake smiles or managers trying to avoid eye contact as they stepped around him like he was part of the furniture. Just the smell of Lysol, fresh paper, and the soft echoes of a building breathing in its sleep. But that night, something was off. As he turned the corner near the West Wing, he noticed something strange. One door was still wide open. Inside, the lights were blazing. That never happened. Harold narrowed his eyes, walked toward it slowly, and peeked inside. Papers were scattered like someone had dropped a briefcase in a panic. Coffee cups half full. A jacket draped over the chair. Someone was still here. He exhaled slowly. Another all-nighter, probably. But then he heard it, the smallest sound, like someone swallowing a sob, try not to let it out. And right there, in that moment, Harold's instincts kicked in, not as a janitor, but as a man who'd seen enough late nights to know the difference between someone working late and someone falling apart. She looked up like a deer caught in a headlight, eyes wide, cheeks blotchy from crying, and fingers shaking over a mess of legal documents. "Sorry," she said quickly, swiping at her tears and trying to straighten up her blouse like nothing was happening. "I didn't think anyone else was here." Harold didn't step in right away. He stood in the doorway, watching her silently, studying the signs, mismatched paragraphs, a red ink folder, her name badge dangling sideways. Jenna Myers, junior paralegal. Her desk was a hurricane. Her energy was worse. She looked young, maybe late 20s, but not naive, just crushed. Harold finally spoke in that low, gravel voice that carried years. "You all right, miss?" She gave a tight laugh that turned into a sigh. "I might have just tanked $1 million real estate contract. Mr. Claus, wrong zoning paperwork. Client flies in tomorrow morning. If I can't fix this, they'll pin it on me." Harold nodded once, not in judgment, but in recognition. He'd seen that look before. On his daughter, when she lost her scholarship. On himself when he missed 3 weeks of work to sit beside his dying wife's hospital bed. That look when the world feels like it's collapsing, and everyone else already clocked out. "You mind if I come in?" he asked, stepping gently into the room. Jenna hesitated, then nodded, embarrassed. "There's nothing you can do." But Harold knew better. He'd lived long enough to know that most of the time, folks don't need you to fix their mess. They just need someone who isn't judging them while they try to sweep it up. Harold pulled up a chair slowly, each movement deliberate, like he was taking the weight off more than just his legs. He sat beside her, not across from her. No desk between them, no hierarchy. Just two people under fluorescent lights past midnight, surrounded by paper, panic, and the quiet echo of potential failure. He didn't pretend no legal contracts. Didn't offer canned advice like, "You'll figure out." No, he opened with something stranger. Back in '92, he said, "I was cleaning a courthouse downtown, night shift just like now. I used to mop outside courtroom, be during a trial, where they were sending the wrong man to prison. You could feel the lies in the air. Defense attorney was green, lost his place reading. The kid on trial was shaking. I remember thinking, Lord, someone's going to fall apart in here, and nobody's going to stop it." Jenna looked at him, curious despite herself. "What happened?" He shrugged. One of the jurors fainted. Whole trial paused. Judge took a recess. That green lawyer got 10 minutes to regroup, reframe, pull himself together. When court resumed, he lit up that prosecution like fireworks. "Got the kid off. Jenna blinked, wiping her eyes again. So what? You're saying I should hope someone faints tomorrow? Harold chuckled. I'm saying sometimes pressure scrambles your mind, and you need 10 minutes and another pair of eyes to make sense of it again. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just has to be human. He leaned forward slightly. So, tell me what happened. Start from the top. I don't need the legalese. Just tell me what you were trying to say. In that moment, something shifted. Jenna didn't see a janitor. She saw someone who wasn't in the storm, offering to be a calm pair of hands to help guide the ship. And that, more than any consultant or superior, was what she needed most. They sat there for over an hour, side by side, paper spread across the table like a battlefield map. Jenna talked while Harold listened, sorting pages, stacking duplicates, uncapping highlighters with his weathered fingers, and asking the kind of questions that cut deeper than any legal assistant she'd ever worked with. What matters to the client? What does the city need to approve? What's the worst-case scenario? His questions were simple, but they pulled clarity out of the chaos. Jenna, under all the stress, started thinking again, real thinking. She told him how her dad used to say, "You don't steer the ship with panic. You steer with patience." Harold nodded, eyes low. Smart man. What happened to him? She hesitated. Lung cancer. VA said it was Agent Orange. He passed 3 years ago. He always told me not to let this job turn me into someone I wasn't. Harold looked at her then, really looked. Then don't. There was no fluff in his tone, no motivational speech. Just a crusty old man with a mop cart reminding her that clarity isn't about brilliance. It's about slowing down long enough to remember why you're even here. You know why I still clean this place? He asked suddenly. I've had chances to retire. Hell, I've been offered easier gigs. But I raised 2 girls in this building, paid for a funeral here, prayed on these stairwells when I thought I'd lose a house. This place, whether they see me or not, it means something, so I treat it like it's mine. Because what you care for right. Jenna didn't respond right away, but she looked at the papers again with a different set of eyes. Not scared ones, honest ones. And that made all the difference. 2 floors above, behind a thick door marked Executive Office, Restricted, a man who hadn't slept in 3 nights leaned forward on his elbows and stared at the black and white security feed glowing from a split screen. James Aldridge, founder chairman, and, for the last 2 months, reluctantly reinstated CEO, had returned to the company after a corruption scandal ousted the board he once trusted. He was trying to rebuild from the top down, but nothing was working. Culture was broken. Trust was gone. Morale was dust. Then something on camera 27 caught his eye. A janitor wheeling a cart into an open legal office. At first, he squinted, annoyed. Why the hell is someone still cleaning down there? But then the feed showed Harold pull up a chair. Talk. Listen. Sort papers. Aldridge leaned in, froze the frame. His breath caught. No way, he whispered. He recognized the man. 17 years ago, when Aldridge's father still ran the company, he introduced a young executive to a janitor in the old lobby. Called him the backbone of the building. Don't ever step over this man to get to the boardroom, he had warned. And now, all these years later, here he was, still there, not scrubbing floors, but coaching one of his brightest junior staff through a crisis. Not with systems, with character. And Aldridge, who'd spent the last month in meetings with lawyers, auditors, and HR consultants, suddenly realized something bone deep. The company he built wasn't broken because of revenue or rebranding. It was broken because it had forgotten its roots. Forgotten people like Harold, the man who shut off the lights every night, but never stopped keeping the place alive. Aldridge stared at the screen like he'd just seen a ghost, the kind of ghost that doesn't haunt with fear, but with shame. His father's voice echoed in the back of his mind, gravelly, tired from years in the trenches of law and leadership, saying, that man's got more backbone in his mop handle than half this building has in its suits. He remembered now, the old janitor in the gray uniform with the limp and the quiet eyes. He had been there during the firm's darkest days. Through the death of Aldridge's mother, the messy lawsuits, the layoffs, the rebuild. Always present, always early. Never needing a spotlight. Aldridge's father used to leave sticky notes on Harold's locker. Thanks for patching that pipe. Appreciate you covering that weekend shift. But once the old man passed, the company got sleeker, shinier, colder. Those handwritten thanks turned into auto-filled surveys. The human soul was traded for profit margins. And yet Harold had stayed. Same shift, same dignity, same silence. And now here he was, not just mopping a hallway, but anchoring a stressed-out junior employee like a lighthouse in a storm. Aldridge leaned back in his chair, a slow exhale pushing from his chest like air escaping a pressure valve. He felt something unexpected. Not pride, not surprise. Guilt. This man, the one he'd stepped past 100 times without noticing, was still doing invisible work that held the whole building together. Work no resume, no KPI, no leadership seminar ever teaches. It wasn't innovation or strategy that Jenna needed tonight. It was wisdom, grounded, unpaid, unrewarded wisdom. And Aldridge? He'd almost missed it. He reached for his coat, a sudden decision rising like heat in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he wanted to come down. Not to manage, not to correct, but to listen. Down on the 39th floor, Harold was packing up, papers sorted. Crisis averted. Jenna looked calmer now, tired but clear-eyed, like someone who'd just come up for air after a deep, long dive. "Thank you," she said softly, brushing her hair behind her ear, her voice lighter but filled with something deeper. "I don't think I've ever met someone like you in this place." Harold smiled, slow and quiet. "Plenty like me, just not in your meetings." He stood, his knees cracking with the effort, and pushed his cart gently toward the door. "You're gonna be fine," he added. Not as comfort, but as confirmation. She believed it. Somehow, coming from him, it felt like a fact. He didn't boast, didn't ask for credit, didn't suggest she put his name on a report or drop a word to her supervisor. He didn't need any of that. He'd done what he came to do. Hold someone steady who was about to fall. That's what real men did. Not perform. Provide. And as he disappeared into the hallway, Jenna stood at the door and just watched. She didn't know much about him. Didn't even know his last name. But she knew this. There was strength in quiet service, power in humility, and in a world so loud and self-centered, that kind of steady presence wasn't just rare, it was sacred. She turned back to her work and finished what she had to do, not because of fear, because someone showed her what dignity looked like when no one else was watching. Harold wheeled his cart down the hallway toward the break room, humming faintly to himself, a habit his wife used to call his tune of purpose. He popped open the vending machine, pulled out a stale black coffee, and took a seat by the window that overlooked the city. That's when the elevator dinged. He turned slightly, expecting security or maybe someone who'd forgotten their laptop. But it was a man in a cashmere overcoat, tailored slacks, and a tired face that looked older than Harold remembered. "Mr. Aldridge," Harold said, with the faintest raise of his brow. "Didn't expect to see you down here." Aldridge didn't answer at first. Just looked at him. Really looked. The way a man looks when he's re-seeing something he long ignored. "You remember me?" Harold nodded. "You were the kid with the mop of blonde hair and the oversized briefcase. Your father used to bring you in on snow days." Aldridge cracked a small, genuine smile. "You used to keep peanut M&Ms in your locker." "Still do," Harold said, pulling a tiny bag from his chest pocket and tossing it across the table. It landed with a soft thud between them. For a long moment, they just sat there, two men who'd walked the same hallway for decades but never really sat at the same table. "Why'd you stay?" Aldridge asked eventually, voice quieter now. "All these years. You could have gone anywhere." Harold shrugged. This place needed taking care of. Someone had to do it. Even when no one noticed? Harold looked out the window. You don't sweep for applause. You sweep so people don't trip. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of mutual recognition, of lives spent trying to hold up corners of the world that others forgot to appreciate. Aldridge took off his coat and laid it gently over the back of a chair. For the first time since he retook the CEO's seat, he didn't feel like a man with something to prove. He felt like a student. "I've been up there." He gestured toward the floors above, trying to fix this company from the top down. Culture problems, PR nightmares, You name it. Harold took a sip of his coffee. Well, son, you ever try fixing a roof in the attic? Doesn't matter what you patch up top if the foundation's already cracked. Aldridge let that land. It hit deeper than any boardroom consultant ever had. You think the foundation's cracked? Harold didn't answer right away. I think people stop caring when they stop being seen. And when the only thing they get noticed for is mistakes, well, they stop showing up whole. He set his cup down. But it ain't too late. You got good folks here. They just need reminding that they matter more than the numbers. Aldridge rubbed his hands together like he was trying to scrub off guilt. I forgot that. I forgot you. Harold chuckled, dry and knowing. You didn't forget me. You just never really saw me. Not until now. That's how it always is with janitors, nurses, lunch ladies. People think the work is small because it ain't loud, but you'd feel it if we stopped. Aldridge didn't argue. Couldn't, because it was true. This wasn't a lecture. It was a mirror, and what he saw reflected wasn't shame. It was opportunity. The rare chance to do better while the man who still swept his floors gave him the blueprint. The next night, Harold returned like always, 6:58 p.m. sharp, clocking in 2 minutes early, same as he had since the Bush administration. But this time, when he entered the supply hallway, there was something taped to his locker, a single yellow post-it. It read, "Let's talk about what else you've seen." No initials, just that scrawled note in the same pen Aldridge used to write memos back in law school. Harold peeled it off slowly, smiled, and folded it into his pocket. After rounds, around midnight, Aldridge met him again, this time without the coat, without the separation. Just two men walking the building like old friends, reminiscing about corners of the company that hadn't been cleaned, literally or metaphorically, in years. "You told me I shouldn't forget the floor I stand on," Aldridge said as they paused at the old reception desk. "I think I did, but I remember now." Harold nodded. Remembering's the first step, but walking different, that's what makes the change. They paused in front of the legal wing. Jenna's door was open, lights out, but a single sticky note glowed under the exit sign. Harold smiled. She'd made it through. And maybe now, just maybe, this company was finally waking up. Not because of some fancy presentation, but because someone, finally, was paying attention to a man who never stopped holding it up on the ground floor. The next night, Harold didn't bring his cart right away. Instead, he met Aldridge near the freight elevator, just the two of them, standing under the kind of buzzing fluorescent lights that made every wrinkle and scar a little more visible. They walked slowly, step by step, through the halls Harold had walked thousands of times before. But this time he wasn't just a janitor. He was a guide. Aldridge didn't talk much at first. Just listened as Harold pointed out things no spreadsheet ever could. That copier down their jams every Thursday when overheats. They rigged it with tape, but it won't last another month. See that crack above the fourth floor conference room? Water damage. Been spreading since last spring, but no one's reported it. Marketing uses the stairwell for mental health breaks. That bench, right there, saved a girl's job more than once. Aldridge followed like a student learning a forgotten language. He realized he'd been running this building like it was a machine, smooth on the outside, broken on the inside. But Harold didn't just see problems. He saw people's stories wait. "You don't learn a place in the org chart," Harold said quietly. "You learn from the floor, from the broken chairs, the forgotten coffee mugs, the tears in the stairwell. That's where the real company lives." And Aldridge knew then, knew it in his gut, that this man, who hadn't had a promotion in over a decade, who still clocked in early and left late, wasn't just a janitor. He was the last honest heartbeat of a place that had nearly lost its pulse. They ended the walk back near the custodial storage room, where Harold paused and opened his locker, an old metal cabinet with rust on the hinges, and a faded sticker of the Cubs from 2003. From the back, beneath a folded poncho and a spare shirt, he pulled out an envelope, yellowed, unsealed. "I wrote this," Harold said, "after your father passed. Company was changing. Thought, maybe someone hear from a guy who saw it from the ground up." He handed it to Aldridge. Inside, in neat cursive handwriting, was a 3-page letter. No complaints. Just ideas. Simple things. Check-in sheets for night staff, maintenance logs tracked by hand to catch repeat issues, rotating lunch hours so the cafeteria team could sit together. Even a suggestion to allow anonymous feedback boxes for custodial workers to report safety concerns without fear. I put it in the suggestion box by HR, Harold said, almost sheepishly. Never heard back. Figured it got tossed. Aldridge didn't say anything for a long time. He just held the letter. The kind you don't fold again because it feels like a relic now. His throat tightened. We should have read this years ago. Harold shrugged. Wasn't the right time. Maybe now it is. And that moment, quiet, unpolished, without fanfare, was a real turning point. Aldridge wasn't just looking at ideas. He was looking at culture. The difference between a company that functioned and one that meant something. A blueprint buried under silence, written by the man who swept the floors while everyone else looked up. The following Monday, the entire building buzzed with confusion. Employees arrived to find a company-wide email titled simply, "From the ground floor up." No charts, no slogans, just a story. Aldridge wrote it himself. He told them what he saw. Jenna, nearly broken, saved by a man no one had properly seen. He described Harold's letter, his years of silent service, the missed birthdays, the hospital bills, the tireless nights. He attached a photo from a security still. Harold and Jenna sitting at that messy desk, both focused, calm, in it together. This, Aldridge wrote, is the heart of our company, and it's time we start listening to it. The email closed with an invitation. Meet the man who's been holding this place together. Conference room B, 10 a.m. No one knew what to expect, but when Harold entered the room that morning, hands freshly washed, shirt pressed for once, every seat was filled. Executives, interns, legal, marketing, facilities, all of them. For once, they stood for him. Aldridge stepped up and said, "Today we honor not a position, not a title, but a principle. Show up, care deeply, stay late when it matters. This man lives it." He turned to Harold. "You've been carrying us for longer than we knew. That ends today." And for the first time in his life, Harold heard applause that wasn't out of politeness. It was thunderous, honest, from people who finally saw him. Aldridge continued, "Effective immediately, Harold Jacobs is no longer our janitor. He's now our building operations advisor, overseeing a new initiative called Ground Floor, a program to listen to, recognize, and promote voices from the invisible heart of this company. Custodial, cafeteria, maintenance, overnight staff." The room gasped, not because of the title, but because they knew how rare it was for someone like Harold to be honored like this. Jenna stood up, voice a little shaky but strong, and said, "He didn't just help me with paperwork. He reminded me why I wanted this job in the first place." Harold tried to say something, but the words caught. Instead, he reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out the old envelope, and held it up. "This ain't about me," he said, voice cracking just enough. "It's about all the people who keep things running when no one's looking. You don't have to be on the stage to make a difference. You just have to keep showing up and doing what's right, whether anyone thanks you or not." The applause rose again, but this time it was softer, respectful, because they weren't clapping for a promotion. They were clapping for a mirror, a man who reminded them who they used to be and who they still had time to become. 1 year later, Harold's final day came. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't need balloons, cake, or a farewell speech. He just clocked in the way he always did. Quiet, on time, steady, but Aldridge knew. And when Harold reached the main doors just before midnight, ready to turn off the lights one last time, the CEO was already there, waiting, holding a small box in his hands. Inside it, a plaque, simple brass. No gold leaf, no fluff, just one sentence engraved. "You kept us standing from the ground floor." Aldridge extended his hand, and Harold shook it, not with pride, but with peace. "Took you long enough," Harold said with a half smile. "Some lessons stick slower than others," Aldridge replied. They shared a look. No more needed saying. Harold turned to the control panel, flipped the breakers one by one, and the building dimmed behind him like a cathedral closing for the night. No spotlight, no parade, Just a man walking into the quiet, head high, back straight, knowing he didn't just clean a building. He cleaned its soul and left behind a floor solid enough for others to finally stand tall.